Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about the AJ Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou fight, which, some may have been excited for, some may have not. But I personally was a little bit excited for this fight because I wanted to see overall how much Ngannou would potentially improve from his last performance, which, of course, was a great performance over that of Tyson the Gypsy King Fury, who, of course, is looked at by many as the debatable best heavyweight fighter of this generation. Really, in my view, at least until proven otherwise, not really debatable because, of course, he was able to defeat that of Wilder and also that of Vladimir Klitschko, two of the juggernauts of his era. But we'll see where that goes because Fury, of course, in his last fight against that of Francis Ngannou, he pretty much looked like shit. And there was a lot of people that even thought that he could have potentially lost that fight against that of Francis Ngannou, which I don't blame them. Now, I had Fury winning that fight, but I only had Fury winning by 1 point. So, of course, eventually, when AJ and Wilder, when they were on the same card and they were supposed to set up that fight, of course, Wilder didn't hold up his end of the bargain. He was supposed to win that fight against Joseph Parker. He got dominated against Joseph Parker. And, of course, Joseph Parker, we're also going to talk about his Zhang performance today, where he ended up winning a very close decision, a very close fight. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But as you can see here overall by the results for the AJ Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou fight, Francis Ngannou pretty much ended up getting folded like a lawn chair. But it is what it is. Anyways, Anthony Joshua, of course, is able to knock him out within that of 2 rounds, which I'm not super shocked about. But I did say in my fight prediction that I did predict that this fight I think was going to go to that of a decision or that it was going to be a latter round stoppage, maybe somewhere around 7 or 8. That's what I thought because I thought that AJ, I wouldn't have been surprised had he scored a couple of knockdowns in this fight. The fact that he did it so early and the fact that Ngannou looked so impressive against Tyson Fury, overall it does, once again bring up a couple questions. Could it be that Tyson Fury maybe is a little bit too long in the tooth? Is he maybe getting a little bit too old and wore down? He is about 36 years old, I believe, when it comes down to it. And he did overall definitely have a couple of wars with that of Deontay Wilder in the first fight and definitely in the third fight. So could it maybe be that? Could it maybe be that Tyson Fury is not as good as what some of us thought? Could it maybe be overall that he just completely underestimated Francis Ngannou? Who knows? Maybe it could be a mix of all three of those things. We'll see. But, Tyson Fury, in my view, more than likely had completely underestimated that of Francis Ngannou. And on top of that, he also does not have the pure punching power like that of an AJ Anthony Joshua. Now, he still does have very good punching power, that of Tyson Fury, but at the end of the day, it's not the same type of power that of an AJ Anthony Joshua has. And Joshua has a type of power to where even if he is in trouble in a fight, even though you can get him to lose confidence more within himself than that of a Tyson Fury, he at least can possibly end the fight within that of one shot. Fury, he kind of can, at times, but he has once again like what I like to call A minus level power. It's not really, power that usually is a one hitter quitter, but it's usually the type of power to where if it does hit you over time, that you're gonna know it. Kind of like that of David Benavidez, where David Benavidez, he's known as the Mexican monster, but David Benavidez really doesn't really have A plus level power. It's more on the A minus level end, at least for his size because he's not a guy that really has one shot knockout power like that of an Artur Beterbiev, or sometimes even a Dimitri Bivol overall if he really likes to lay it on you. But one could even say that Bivol doesn't have that type of power either. But that's a conversation for another time. But anyways, Anthony Joshua looking as dominant as what he did over Francis Ngannou pretty much overall is the best thing that could have potentially happened, I think, for boxing at the current moment in time. Because overall, this is going to now put boxing, I think, in a little bit of a better light, especially after Ngannou was able to somewhat embarrass that of Tyson Fury in their outing. And then on top of that, this is going to set up a humongous fight between that of Tyson Fury and AJ Anthony Joshua if Tyson Fury is able to hold up his end of the bargain and is actually able to beat that of Alexander Usyk. And that is no guarantee because Tyson Fury did not look good in his last outing. He's getting close to 36 years old. He's been in a couple of wars. Now, in my view, he's still at the prime and potentially the peak of his career. I just think that he heavily, heavily underestimated that of Francis Ngannou and also had certain faults exposed in his style that maybe that he's had for a little bit that he's usually not used to because he hasn't fought a fighter really of that size before. So overall, we'll see where Tyson Fury goes from there. But he's going to have to really pick up his end of the bargain against that of Alexander Usyk. We'll see what happens there. And once again, that is no guarantee because Alexander Usyk is a tremendous fighter. Great fighter. One of the top 5 to top 3 pound for pound fighters in the world right now, in my view, hands down, not a doubt about it. But anyways, once again, why did AJ Anthony Joshua win this fight the way that he did? Once again, me and my friend, we always have a debate about overall what the most impactful martial arts are. And in my view, when you talk about, martial arts or a fighting style, in my view, it's important overall to try and train or overall, get yourself familiar with 5 martial arts especially. Especially if you're going to be fighting in the UFC or the MMA world or something like that, or if you just have a high particular interest in those martial arts, such as myself. I think that boxing is a necessity. I think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a necessity. I think that wrestling is a necessity. I think that Taekwondo is a necessity. And I think that Muay Thai is a necessity. I think that each and every single one of those martial arts can teach you certain things. When you talk about wrestling, it can teach you the certain advantageous positions of where to put the body and also to use your body weight in order to get elite grappling positions. But without that, excuse me, without that of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu overall is a great defensive maneuver that can pretty much have you working on your back. It can have you working overall in the top position. It can have you basically working in any position. If you don't have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mixed with wrestling, then overall you're going to get caught in certain submissions. I've seen it overall before in certain training videos and also in certain training montages and certain experiences. So it ends up happening. Muay Thai overall, of course, is great for the elbows and the knees on the inside when it comes down to it, and the lower leg attacks when it comes down to it. Taekwondo is really great at using your feet to move in and out, great with the kicks, and at times also with the hands, depending on what gym they're properly trained at. And boxing also is a necessity as well, because even though boxing doesn't train anything else other than that of hands, overall it does train on how to move. It teaches you proper footwork. It teaches you to move in and outside of the ranges, how to change levels, how to keep your chin tucked. Boxing is still a martial art that is very essential in my view, even if you're going to get into that of MMA, because in terms of hand-to-hand combat, there's no strikers that are better in the world, at least in terms of hand-to-hand combat, than that of a boxer, period. You're not going to find any Muay Thai fighter, you're not going to find any Taekwondo artist, you're not going to find overall any of those guys that train in the other martial arts that are usually better in hand-to-hand combat than that of a Golden Gloves or a professional level boxer. It's not going to happen. It is what it is, because their hand strikes usually are a little bit more advertised. Their hand strikes usually, even though they can be trained not to advertise, at the end of the day, boxing just teaches you a little bit of different things. I think that it teaches you overall to use your feet in and outside a little bit better. Not saying that it doesn't happen also in the other martial arts, but boxing, in my view, when you take a look at a boxer, especially sometimes in the MMA ring like that of a Dustin Poirier or an Ilia Topuria or a Conor McGregor, you can tell when they have boxing experience, because you can tell when they know how to use their feet to move in and out for counters, to use certain angles. That's why boxing is also a necessity to learn, even in that of the mixed martial arts world. Now, if you just have boxing and you have a complete MMA fighter, then yeah, the boxer more than likely is going to lose that fight. But once again, boxing is a very important skill to learn, and overall we see why. Because Francis Ngannou, even though I actually don't think that he had the worst stance here, he was very quick on his feet in this fight compared to that of Anthony Joshua. He was moving around, but the problem is that Francis Ngannou just fights way too tall. And that's a problem with a lot of MMA fighters. They fight way too tall, a lot of the times with their chin in the air, and overall not with a lot of level changes. Now in MMA, you can't really level change quite as much or the exact same as what you would for a boxer, or as a boxer, excuse me, because in boxing, of course, you're only using your hands. So you can duck below the waist overall and not worry about a knee, or not worry about a kick, or not worry about potentially getting taken down by that of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist or that of a wrestler. So of course you have to handle things differently. But in boxing, what it does tell you, or what it does teach you, is to move your head, to always change levels, to use certain angles, to set up certain traps with your hands. And a lot of MMA fighters don't know how to do that. Now, to be fair to Francis Ngannou, he definitely looks like he has a little bit of boxing experience. I don't think that he's the worst boxer in the world. And I think that's a big part of the reason of why Tyson Fury really had so much problems with him. Because he ended up parrying a little bit better. His defense was a little bit better than what he thought. And the power ended up being for real. And in the first round, really, I thought that Francis Ngannou was actually winning the round until AJ Anthony Joshua knocked him down with the right hand. But the thing is, overall, once again, is that AJ Anthony Joshua is a real deal boxer. That's not me claiming that, he's one of the top 5 most skilled boxers on the planet or anything like that. But he's one of the more skilled heavyweight fighters on the planet. He's a real deal level heavyweight fighter. He's one of the greater heavyweight fighters within that of boxing history. Now, would I place him within the top 10? No, not necessarily. But at the end of the day, AJ, once again, the thing that he knows overall is how to set up certain traps with his punches and how to throw articulate without advertising some of his punches, to use his jab at least more than Francis Ngannou. And AJ has never really been known as a fighter that really has used his jab to his complete advantage at times. At times, you can give him the give up, and that's why I thought that, or not give up necessarily, but to doubt himself. That would be the more appropriate word, but, or the more appropriate phrase. But, Francis Ngannou, in my view, he didn't look super bad in this fight. He had a counter left hook that I thought was very good. He had a right hand and a jab that looked decent. But the thing is that Francis Ngannou, once again, that you can tell that he was never taught, is once again overall to turn overall with certain punches. That's the reason why he got knocked down in the first place, because he turned a little bit, but he really didn't turn enough. He should have turned overall all the way over, especially with that left hand, or he should have been, ducked a little bit with that. He fought way, way, way too tall in this fight. And that's why AJ Anthony Joshua, especially in the second round, once that knockdown happened, in the first round, he had such an easy time landing the right hand because Francis Ngannou's head, it wasn't moving. It wasn't moving side to side, and it wasn't moving up and down. It wasn't moving anywhere. It was staying in the same level. And it's very important, once again, to change levels. Now, in MMA, you can't change levels, once again, quite the exact same, because you have to worry about other things other than just that of the hands. But at the end of the day, once again, Francis Ngannou, you can tell that, even though he actually has some boxing ability, that, he's not going to be a guy that's going to be a top 5 boxer, at least within that of the heavyweight division. Now, could he potentially maybe, once again, maybe get, another fight against a boxer? He could. If he got a fight against, the Chinese fighter Zhang, if he got a fight against some of the other guys, in that weight class, maybe Joe Joyce, maybe it'd end up a little bit better for him. I don't know. But at the end of the day, Francis Ngannou, at least in terms of fighting a top 5 heavyweight in the world, is just not going to work out for him, at least at the current moment in time. But once again, I give Ngannou a lot of credit. Not only is he a great athlete, but I do respect somewhat of his boxing ability for an MMA fighter. He's not the worst boxer that I've ever seen. Once again, there's certain defensive maneuvers that he does that I've seen a lot of boxers do. And I think that had he grew up with boxing, that he could have relatively possibly became a champion, that he really could have possibly became a champion. I think Francis Ngannou, that he is a real deal fighter. Of course, he's a real deal MMA fighter, but even in terms of boxing, I think that there's definitely some potential there. Do I think that he's a champion level boxer, at least, compared to some of the other guys that are there now? No, not necessarily. But I think that had he trained in it once again from his youth, or as long as what he had been in MMA, he could have potentially became a champion of the world. You never know. But Francis Ngannou, once again, I give him a lot of credit overall for trying this. Of course, he got handsomely paid for this. And on top of that, once again, there were some skills that I seen there that he didn't really look too bad in. Once again, he doesn't parry the worst that I've ever seen. He tries to keep his hands up relatively there, but they were still a little bit too loose in my view, at least at certain times. But the biggest problem is that he just really did not move his head enough. And that's why it was so easy for AJ Anthony Joshua really to get that right hand in there. No level changes. His head was not moving from side to side. He wasn't bending over, bending at the waist when it came down to it. He just really wasn't moving out of the way. And once again, he also was trying to outbox AJ Anthony Joshua in the middle of the ring. In my view, even though you had success with Fury in that first fight with that really wasn't the way to go. You were supposed to make that fight a brawl, because if you were just going to be defensive in the middle of the ring overall once again and try, to let AJ come to you, he was going to do it. Because once again, sometimes with the fighter, they do what you allow them to do. With AJ Anthony Joshua and Joseph Parker, for example, they both ended up winning those fights because their opponent ended up letting them do whatever they wanted to them. Both Joseph Parker and AJ Anthony Joshua in the past have shown that if you instill somewhat of doubt in their mind, that they can potentially lose the fight. But Zhang overall didn't throw enough in that fight. He was too ill prepared. And, overall when it came to that of Francis Ngannou, I think that he tried to box too much in the middle of the ring. And, of course, he's just not, a boxer like what AJ Anthony Joshua is. So it's just going to be completely different. But I still give Francis Ngannou a lot of credit. But, if you know both of the sports, you can kind of see, some of the idiosyncrasies, or you can see some of the small differences, some of the small details, of the differences in the styles. And MMA fighters, a lot of the times when they get in the boxing ring, and that's why usually they have almost no chance, usually against a boxer, because the hand-to-hand combat usually is not particularly close. Not usually. But, to be fair, once again, to Ngannou, I don't actually even think that this was the worst showing that I've seen, because once again, there were some moments where he did catch AJ in this fight. There was some moments, but unfortunately for him, he was just not sharp enough nor intelligent enough overall to really compete with a world-class boxer, at least to this generation, in that way. It is what it is, or at least in this particular weight class. But it is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much overall about it for today about the AJ versus Francis Ngannou fight. We'll see where it goes from here. I'm not quite sure if Francis is going to take on another boxing fight. We'll see about that. AJ, of course, he's going to love to try and get that Tyson Fury fight. And that probably is the fight overall that they're rooting for. But we'll see overall what ends up happening with that. We'll see. But also to talk about the Joseph Parker versus Zhang fight. That was a fight that Zhang ended up losing. I think that in my very short prediction, I didn't really make a very detailed one because I didn't really study it as much as I probably should have. I believe that I predicted Zhang to win the fight because I thought that eventually he would make Parker a little bit too uncomfortable, and overall that he would potentially either be able to stop him or just outpoint him. And I thought that it was a very close fight. I probably personally would have scored it a draw, but with Joseph Parker winning the fight, I don't really have a problem with it because he threw a lot, especially in the latter part of that fight. And Zhang overall, it was just very apparent that he was very confident after the 2 knockdowns, and he's a fighter that, he's about 300 pounds. He's about 290. He's a very big guy, and he relies on a lot on his power. He relies a lot on his size. When it comes down to it, he relies a lot on that. And on top of that, you can tell that he doesn't have the greatest stamina in the world. Not only is the man about 40 years old, but the man is 290, and you can tell that he's a little bit, flabby in the stomach, a little bit flabby in the gut. It is what it is. At the end of the day, he ended up giving up that fight because he allowed Joseph Parker to do, certain things that he was allowed to do. If you instill doubt within Joseph Parker's mind, and if you pressure him intelligently, if you put him up against the ropes, if you stick a good jab in his face, and if you're able overall, once again, to get him uncomfortable, Joseph Parker has been able to fold in the past. Now, I give Joseph Parker a certain amount of credit because Joseph Parker has now come up big in 2 big fights in his career. One against Deontay Wilder and the other against Zhang. So I give him a lot of credit for both of those wins because Zhang, of course, was coming off of the 2 knockout wins over that of Joe Joyce. But, of course, I gave Joseph Parker more of a chance against Zhang than what I did Joe Joyce because Joyce is a cardio machine, and he's usually going to come forward right at you. Of course, he has his own faults, but he has a lot of power, and he's going to come right at you the whole entire time throughout the fight. So that's what Joe Joyce can do. Zhang is a guy to where he does tire out a little bit more. I thought that he'd have more stamina, and I thought that he'd be able to throw a little bit more. So that's why I predicted Zhang to win the fight. And had he been able to do that, he would have won the fight. But once again, he let Joseph Parker way too off the hook, especially in the second half of the fight. There was very few amount of rounds that in the second half of the fight that Zhang was able to win in that fight. So once again, Zhang may be mad or pissed off overall that he didn't end up winning that fight, but he can't really blame anyone else other than himself because he had the potential to possibly beat Joseph Parker, but he was just way too lethargic, way too slow in the fight overall. Didn't really have the stamina when it came down to it, and didn't throw enough, didn't implement his game plan. Like I said, if you let Joseph Parker tee off on you, it's almost kind of like an Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner, when he gets in the ring against an opponent that really knows what they're doing, Adrian Broner pretty much gets beat every single time. Now, Joseph Parker, he might be better than what Adrian Broner was, for his weight classes, debatably, because I would probably say that Joseph Parker is an A- level fighter, and Broner probably is about a B+ level fighter. But at the end of the day, Joseph Parker is a guy to where if you're able to implement a game plan and stay consistent, you can beat Joseph Parker. It's been shown overall a few times in his career. But if you just let him tee off on you, and if you're afraid to exchange with him, or overall if you stand back and if you give him way too many opportunities, he's going to take those opportunities. And on top of that, he stayed way too much inside the mid-range. Joseph Parker is a guy that is extremely quick. And he's a guy overall that for a heavyweight fighter, he's pretty nimble and he's pretty quick. Sure, he does have some defensive, inefficiencies or deficiencies, but at the end of the day, Zhang just let him way too far off the hook. In my view, he should have really stuck that jab in his face the whole time, done a lot more body work up against the ropes when it came down to it, landing that uppercut and that hook to the body. He did a good job trying to set up the right hook and, setting up the left cross, and he even knocked down Joseph Parker a couple times in this fight. But it wasn't enough once again because Zhang once again let him off the hook in way too many other rounds. So it is what it is. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this video today. Thank you all so much for watching. And thank you all once again for those of you that tuned into the live stream. And for those of you once again that want to see overall, that's of me live stream UFC 299 tomorrow. Certainly let me know about that. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.